Hello and welcome to Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. I'm an author, coach, and healer. You can learn more about me at theandygrant.com. Real Men Feel exists to remind men that they're human beings and that they have the right to express and experience all of their emotions. We have conversations that most men are not having, but that all men can benefit from. Our returning guest today is Owen Marcus. Owen is a pioneering coach and author known for integrating emotional physiology and attachment theory into men's emotional connection. His 30-year journey has had him featured in Men's Health, The New York Times, ABC News, and The Today Show. Owen helps men transform their relationships and leadership skills, offering new insights into achieving personal and professional success through emotional wellness. We enjoy a wide-ranging discussion covering emotional leadership and resilience and lots of somatic therapies that Owen has studied and used since the 1970s. Listen in and learn about Rolfing, Polyvagal theory, anti-fragility, attachment theory, and many more aspects of our physiology and how it relates to our personal and emotional growth. You'll also discover what conservatives and liberals both get wrong regarding men and emotions. Let's get to it. Hello, Owen, and welcome back to Real Men Feel.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, Andy.
You've been a guest a couple of times. I had to go back and see. The first time you were on was back in 2018, talking about emotional intelligence in men. And then more recently, you were on in November of 2020, and that's when you were sharing Every Man, your global community for men. And so I know that you've left Every Man and have started a new community. So tell me what you're up to.
Yeah, I was one of the founders of Every Man and brought all the programs that I already had and developed all the other programs that Every Man had. And it just wasn't working out. So I took my core team and we started MELD at the beginning of the year, which stands for Men's Emotional Leadership Development. And we're doing everything and more that we did with Every Man and really dialing in, you could say, the technology that we developed, which is primarily based on the what we call emotional let me back up. Emotional physiology, which is how our emotions really start with our bodies.
And is that focus on the physical, is that different for most sort of therapies that are out there?
Yeah, most therapies these days, and it's starting to change, but for the last few decades have been really pretty cognitive or analytical, which I would say are sort of more top-down oriented. And I just had the good fortune of being in the right place at the right time back in the late 70s when somatic psychotherapy was starting out. And so I got to study with the people that were developing those therapies. So back then, what we were doing was very fringe. Now, these somatic therapies are like the hot therapies to study. And so for all these decades, I've been studying and really applying how to work with people, men and women, but now primarily with men, on or through their physical body, a physical experience to better dial in and better connect to their emotional experience and being able to express those experiences in a way that gets other people connected.
So does somatic therapy mean just it's any sort of therapy that has touch involved, or is it something else?
That's a good question because in the broad sense, it means anything to deal with the body. So it could be uh, massage, it could be Rolfing, which is one of the things that I've done for decades. It could be really any kind of body work in a general sense. And then any kind of psychotherapy that utilizes the body as part of the psychotherapy process. So now, most of the time when people are talking about somatic therapies, they're usually talking about somatic psychotherapies.
And I've heard of Rolfing a lot. I don't think I've ever seen it, so I'm not really sure what it is. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was developed by Dr. Rolf. She never wanted it named after her. It started back in the late 50s. And the story is that she was working on her son because no one else could help him. And he got well, and then one person after another. And then she ended up in Esalen, in Big Sur in California. And that's really when it took off. And she started working with people there. They saw these amazing results on two levels. Their bodies changed, their physical structure changed, and their emotional state changed. And so what she developed is a series of 10 sessions where the goal is to realign the body physically with gravity. So we don't usually think about the body being aligned with gravity. We do if we're building a building or a bridge, but we don't think that our bodies deal with gravity. And they do. And our body functions better when it's better aligned. So she'd work with function and movement. But what everyone found out is in the process of getting rid of the old chronic tension, so the body would line up. And so it's like literally the skeleton had enough room to do what it needed to do. A lot of old trauma and emotions would get released. So when I got Rolfed back in the late 70s, did the 10 sessions. 9 months later, I was an inch taller and 20 pounds lighter. And I wasn't fat. I just had these huge, tight legs where all my tension was. A lot of it was emotional tension or trauma. And when that let go, my legs just dropped away and I went from a waddle to a normal walk. And my structure really changed, but probably what changed even more was my whole emotional state changed. I went from being very uptight, not only physically, but emotionally, to much more relaxed. And that was really the impetus for me doing everything I've done ever since.
Oh, cool. So that was your gateway drug, so to speak,
It
into
was, it was. And I resisted. Yeah, only reason I got into it because I had a roommate in this is Boulder, Colorado, where the Rolfing school was, or is. He was an attorney, given up his law practice of 8 years, and he argued his case every night. And I said, all right, I'll try it. And that's all it took. One session, I was like
Oh,
sold.
cool. So men's emotional leadership development. Does that mean you're really working with men in business and government, people that leadership is really part of their career?
Um, yes and no. I mean, we do B2B, like Google's been one of our biggest clients, but most of it's B2C, working with men in a more of a consumer way, a one-to-one or groups or trainings. Now, what we found is as men go through our process, and there's a lot of ways they can do that, they become better leaders. And often it's just in their primary relationship or, at home. They're showing up in a more embodied emotional way, and they're not working at it. They learn these skills that were never taught. And because they're intrinsic skills that we should have, and we're hardwired to have them, that once these guys learn them, it's easy, it's natural, and they just find themselves like with their partners behaving differently because that's who they want to be and that's who they're being.
So it improves one's leadership of their own life, not necessarily only if I'm on a leadership track for my career.
Right. And so most of my coaching clients come from because they want to work on the relationship. But most of my coaching clients are either entrepreneurs or like C-level executives. And so after a couple of months, the relationship sort of turns around because they've turned around using these simple skills. And then we start working with applying these skills in their business context.
No, from the last time we spoke briefly, but before recording the show, you mentioned polyvagal therapy, which I had not heard of.
Polyvagal theory.
Theory. All right. So what is that
Close.
theory?
Yeah, we just had the fellow that invented it on our program a couple weeks ago, and his name is Stephen Porges, and he was actually he was the first research director for the Rolfing Institute, and he was a scientist that really started discovering that we have this. He didn't discover the nerve, the vagal nerve, which is the tendocranial nerve, which is the largest nerve of the body, but he started to discover its impact on us and its impact on our physical and emotional health. And one of the things that him and others have discovered is that 80% of that big nerve goes from our gut all the way out through our body into our brain, and 20% goes down. So it's a big reason that everyone's talking about the gut brain now. And so he explains through his research how all that works. And he got involved in Rolfing because he was working with Rolfing. They did some research decades ago, and because Rolfing again works with that. So one of the things that he discovered is that as mammals, and particularly as humans, we have this ability to co-regulate. And so I'm looking at you now and I'm listening to you now, Andy, and you're relaxed, your voice is relaxed, you're engaging. So the first thing is you feel safe, which is the first thing that we're always, at least unconsciously, looking for. Is this person or is this situation safe? So assuming, and you are safe, I start to downregulate, I relax. So my physiology starts to express that I am safe. My voice is a voice of someone that's safe. My facial muscles, my body movement represents unconsciously that I feel safe. And that creates this sense of co-regulation. So we start to connect to each other, and I start to mirror your behavior, you start to mirror my behavior, and we start to connect. And in theory, we learn this as a kid, but the problem is we didn't get enough training as a kid. So we don't get into what they call secure attachment, which is a core of what attachment theory talks about. So as and one of the things that happens when we work with guys, particularly like in a group setting, is men start to teach each other how to co-regulate, how to connect in a vulnerable and authentic way. So that starts to train their bodies on how to do that with others.
So you mentioned vulnerability there, and that's something that we talk about on Real Men Feel often. What are sort of the misconceptions that people still have about men and vulnerability?
Obviously, the biggest one in our culture is that to be vulnerable as a man is to be weak. Uh, and we all sort of know that it takes courage to be vulnerable, but we often don't do that because if we are in the normal setting, we're often shamed or rejected or, all the things that we experience. But I'm sure you see this with your work. We do with our work. We create a safe space. One guy ends up being vulnerable and it shows everyone in the space that it's safe. And suddenly everyone's being vulnerable. And we like within the course of a few minutes, we can flip it 180 degrees.
Right. Yeah, that's I find time and time again. Uh, it takes that first man to kind of break the ice, and then yeah, everyone gets permission, feels that sense of safety, or and starts to downregulate and relax and really open up.
Because we want that and we need that.
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Are you seeing that happen? If you work with like a Google, is that able to happen in their own meetings going forward without you present?
Um, yeah, or at least they tell us it happens more. And so,
Okay.
um, what we do to get there is we teach them some simple skills. We sort of chunk down what we do and, have a whole manual, a 100-page manual, and we don't do all that for Google. So we take the essence of that and we teach these men how to connect to their own somatic experience, which again downregulates them, has them feel more relaxed. And as they're connecting to their own experience, we teach them to be able to read other people, read the nonverbals. And we go through exercises where they learn how to do that. And these, we primarily work with Google X, which is a scientist. So these are brilliant people. And you would say they're in their head, but they really want to connect and they pick it up real quick. And they find that once they learn these skills, it takes a little practice, they start implementing them in their meetings
Hmm.
and in, dealing with their associates. And so rather than go in there, maybe with being the bull in the china shop or just in their head, they remember to slow down, connect to themselves, and start to, reach out and connect to these other people that they're interfacing with. And what they find is their meetings are more productive.
And I've heard in the past you say that emotional intelligence is a real driver behind any man's success. So is this one of the ways that shows up by the better relationships, the better communication at work, and that having that place of safety in any interaction you have?
Yeah, it does. And, ever since Goldberg or what's his name, Dan, well, anyway, wrote his book about emotional intelligence, which has been decades, many decades. Yeah, this whole thing of emotional intelligence has gotten really popular. I'm all for it. The but is they don't tell us how to do that. They tell us how we should be,
Yeah.
which for men so often creates more performance anxiety. So you go, you want me to be this way. You don't want me to be that way. You want me to be this way. All right. And then we're not given tools. So guys get more stressed out. The whole DEI thing is stressing a lot of guys out, but we're not giving guys the simple tools that we all should have had growing up. And so what happens is they might try, but they fail. And then guys, one of the ways that we orient is we take on things that we think we can succeed at. And we sort of like challenges, but when we think we can't succeed at something and we haven't been succeeding at it, we just sort of walk away, we give up. So a lot of guys are giving up everything from relationships or trying to use these skills that they've never been taught in these professional situations. But when we can take these guys aside, put them in a safe place, which I used to think it would have to be just a male setting, but I've done it now in co-ed settings, but in a safe place where these men have an opportunity to sort of screw up and learn what they didn't get to learn as kids, they will learn it. And once they learn it, and then they can apply it in these professional situations and actually create more what they call now psychological safety, which is another thing that's gotten really popular. But you can't create psychological safety unless you're creating the things that we're talking about, like co-regulation.
Hmm. And are these skills that anyone can learn?
Anyone can learn.
Yeah.
And
And are they only kind of learned through experience? It's not just a book. It's not it's not some online meeting. It's got to be you go somewhere and you're physically with other men.
no, we've done it, to my amazement, very well virtually. But to infer what you're saying, it needs to be interactional.
Okay.
I mean, you can read about it, you can study it, you can learn the science about it, which is one of the things I love about Porges. He knows the science. Hell, he's written books, half a dozen books on it. But he interfaces with the practitioners, first the Rolfers, now the therapists, and he gets all this feedback. So you got to learn it, not just cognitively, you got to learn it experientially, which could be virtual, but it's the interaction that teaches you.
And what are some of the specific skills? You mentioned simple skills a lot. So what are some of them?
Um, Like one of the skills that we teach is what I call the ROC formula, ROC. R is we slow down to relax, which is the key thing. Because when we slow down, because people tell us, they've always told me, relax, oh, relax. All right. But then again, it's a performance thing and I get more stressed because you're telling me to relax and I don't know how to. So we teach people how to relax. A lot of that is this somatic mindfulness. That's a general term, which is being aware of your body. So when you're aware of your body, you are telling yourself, you're telling your body, your unconscious, your emotions, and your conscious mind, oh, that I'm safe. Because when we're in a threat response, our awareness is out here. And it's sort of going back to the past, remembering things, thinking about the future. That's where we are when we're in a threat response. But when we're downregulated and relaxed, we at least have some awareness of our own experience. So when we can be aware of our own experience, particularly somatically, our nervous system downregulates, our endocrine system downregulates. We go from a sympathetic fight or flight response or the parasympathetic frozen response to this state of being able to socially engage, and which is what Ford just talked about. So that's the key. Slow down, then you relax. The O is you open up to being vulnerable. And I know you'll like this, but it needs to come from a place of being relaxed. Because if I'm trying to be vulnerable, I'm not relaxed, and I might be trying, but I'm all jacked up, you're going to pick that up. And it's going to be a dissonance, an inconsistency. And you're going to be like doing what you're doing, like, this doesn't feel right. But if I'm relaxed, even if I'm feeling nervous, but I'm willing to feel nervous, there'll be a congruency. So it's not like you have to be Mr. Mellow. So, we know this when people are giving speeches. If they just say, look, I'm nervous, they're willing to be nervous, the audience relates to them. But if they pretend they're not nervous and they're pushing through that, the audience feels that tension. And so when we could be vulnerable to our own experience and maybe express it in some way, we open up. And again, we prove to the other person that it's safe. So they start to open up. And then the C is we reach out for connection. from the vulnerable place, from being aware of our somatic. We reach out and we take a risk. And that's scary, particularly from a vulnerable place, because we might be rejected, we might be shamed, we might be ignored, and that takes courage. But a lot of people, particularly if they're a little open, they're going to sense that and they're going to respond.
In a matching way or positive way, receptive way, right? Yeah.
Right.
Or I guess, I mean, they don't have to. I mean,
No, they don't have to.
yeah,
And I don't always practice it, but when I do, and if they reject me, yes, it hurts. The but is I can always go, yeah, but I took the risk.
right,
And like any exercise, you do it enough, you get stronger at it. You get better at it. So
right,
even if I don't always succeed, I'm always honing that skill of being able to show up that way.
right. Yeah, it's important. Um, and no, for me, anytime I'm learning any new skill, but especially, when I was first daring to share some of my experiences, talk about depression and suicidology and such, if someone didn't receive it well, if the first time I shared with someone was like, "Oh, you're an idiot, get out of here," like, oh my god, like I might never have done it again. So
Mhm.
it really is important. Again, that's why you have that safe space. You learn these skills, ideally in a circle of men that support you, so that if someone ever does reject or just ignore whatever you're trying to connect with about, you don't go, well, there goes that. I'll never share again. I'll never open up again. Like, no, it's just that one time. It's not because it doesn't work.
Exactly. And it still hurts, but you go, I was sharing this whole thing last week in my men's group, and they honored me. Guys were crying, they were cheering me, whatever. It's like I was received. So no, the issue's with this one guy I'm talking to, not with me.
Right. Right. Yeah. You can bump into someone else's stagnant growth or difficulty being vulnerable, so they just can't deal with you. And yeah, it's not about you. It is about them. Yeah. Right. So is this notion of practicing this, is that really at the core of emotional resilience?
Yeah, it is about practicing it. And the term anti-fragile?
No.
Yeah, Nassim Taleb wrote this book. It's been out for several years called Anti-Fragility. And I love it. The title's a little confusing. And he talks about being fragile, which we understand about what that is. He talks about resiliency. And then the third one is what he calls anti-fragile, which is really a continuation where it's more than resilient. And I think it's sort of what we were just saying earlier. It's having these experiences and failing at them, or having challenges and leaning into a challenge and getting stronger from these experiences. Because it's more than just being resilient. It's using these challenges and mistakes and failures to become more robust. And his simple example is, you go and work out with weights, and every day you might put a little more weight on it. So it's still hard. You might fail, but over time you're getting stronger. And just as your body or your muscles get stronger, when we lean into these kinds of challenges and failures, we get more anti-fragile, we get stronger. And and that's one of the powers of the groups that you have and I have is guys can fail, and they do. And one of the things I've said from day one of all my groups and trainings is make mistakes. Like Bucky Fuller says, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. So make mistakes. And it's easier to make mistakes in a safe place.
Yeah. So one thing about like the definition of resilience really means coming back to another state. So if I'm always angry, emotional resilience could mean, well, you temporarily got me happy, now I'm going to go back to my angry state. So I like the notion of, yeah, being robust is kind of going beyond the old normal. So yeah, I like that. I like that. So I'm gonna look for that book. That sounds cool. Um, what sort of challenges are you seeing men that have them coming to MELD today?
Well, pretty much what we've seen, I've seen for really decades. Probably the biggest challenge is men struggle in relationships. And we don't get guys that are, hugely struggling, but we get guys that are often, successful professionally, but their relationships don't model the success they have in other parts of their life. And they're smart enough to realize, and this is where I started, where I was the consistent variable. And they go, um, it's not working out. Maybe I need to work on myself. And some have tried therapy, some haven't, some are sent by their therapist, and they're looking at, developing these skills and maybe realizing it's not that there's something wrong with me. It's just that I didn't get to learn what I needed to learn.
Mm.
And so they're coming for, to develop relational skills. They're in a transition in their life. That's another reason. Uh, they want to develop these skills in a professional way. Another one is they want real friends because, and you probably see this, Andy, that, as we get older as men, most men, and the research supports this, have fewer and fewer friends. So when we were in school, maybe the military, we had really close friends. So we might have friends, but we don't, and most men will say they don't have the closeness, the intimacy, the support that they had when they were younger. And we miss it. And it's like, where do you go to do that? And so guys are coming because they go, I want a venue where I can be real and I can be with other men that are being real and we can have a real friendship.
Hmm. So what's a typical experience for a consumer of MELD? Is it online and virtual? Is it a weekend, a week, multiple weeks, or everything?
All the above. So most guys start out doing what we call a core program, which is a program I developed before I ever started Everyman. So it's been out for 10 years. I had different names, and it was 6 weeks. We tightened it up down to 4 weeks, and now we're going to expand it to 3 months because it's a really rich program where we teach the basic skills again, really through interaction. And a lot of the skills are these somatic skills that guys really relate to. Because again, you probably see this so often, if we come at guys purely emotionally, some will resist, some will run. But when we come at it through the physiology and the science of the physiology, guys relate to it. So we get a lot further, a lot quicker. And we just want to make that program a richer program. So that's usually where guys start. And then we have retreats. We have I run a 12-week intense group coaching program. Yeah, we have individual coaching. And then we also have, ends up being about a 9-month certification program. There's like 3 parts to it, and there's time off in between some parts where we teach laymen and professional coaches and therapists and psychiatrists these skills so they can do that one-to-one or in group settings. And I've designed the course. It's like 100 different lessons. And we've done it 3 times over the years, and we'll do it again. And it's a deep, deep dive in our work, and it's a huge transformational experience for men because you're learning it from doing it, and so you're doing it with yourself, and you're doing it with the cohort that you're in, and they're working on you, and you're working on them, and you can't go through this program and not be changed.
Cool. And you did mention doing some Coed things as well, and I know you have you're doing your first couples retreat soon. Is that right?
Yeah, so we're doing a 6-day couples retreat down in Costa Rica for the Valentine's week in February. My partner's a couples therapist, and Dahlia has been a therapist or couples therapist for decades. We've been doing couples weekends for, I don't know, 7 years, and her before that. But we were invited to do this couples retreat down in Imiloa, which is amazing retreat center in Costa Rica, and maybe the nicest one down there.
Mm.
And so they invited us to come down and lead this couples retreat down there. And we're already more than half sold out. And so it's taken what we've done before in a weekend and just enriching it. And it's a hold me tight retreat. The hold me tight is a term that Sue Johnson developed. And Sue Johnson was also on our program, but she recently passed away, which is really unfortunate. Um, and she was the person that developed emotional focus therapy, which is now a very hot therapy. And she took the whole attachment theory, which again I said sort of started with babies, and really found a way to apply it to couples. And then she developed a whole therapy around it. And being a scientist, she did a lot of research around the therapy. And even though she's gone, the therapy continues to grow. And so we've taken that approach and her hold me tight sort of program and enriched it. And now we're doing it over essentially a week.
Very cool. So you've developed all these programs. You've been learning the physiology and emotionality and masculinity of being a human male for decades. How did you learn what it means to be a male?
I think I learned it by not learning it, like most of us. I mean, I grew up in a family that I used to think was pretty normal, and then as I got into all this work, in my 20s, I realized it looked normal on the outside, but wasn't normal. It wasn't normal in terms of healthy normal. It might have been average, but the average part was there wasn't a lot of connection. And the more I got into this, and the more I realized that I didn't have what now they would call secure attachment. And I think that was actually part of why I developed Asperger's, was I didn't know how to connect. So with that and my dyslexia and a few other things, I was sort of pushed into really learning this. And like they say, the best way to sort of learn something is to sort of teach it. So not that I really wanted to teach it, but I wanted to be in a men's group. And I started one when I had an integrated clinic back in Scottsdale in 1995 and saw that, you know, just being with men in a real way, I could learn this. And then I've been in men's groups ever since then. And just being in that kind of peer-to-peer setting and then bringing in all this other technology that really facilitated it with myself and thousands of men now, we've seen, applying this method and in these peer-to-peer settings, men's lives can change or transform pretty quickly. And we have a lot of guys that said, if I wasn't in this group or didn't do this program, I would have killed myself. And they did a documentary film on this group and this approach several years ago. And one of the guys in the film says, "Yeah, you know, I was going to kill myself, and then I remembered I had this group, and I could call Owen and the group, and Owen would take care of me." And they did, and I'm like, I'm alive because of it.
So how does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, it's this group that I started in Idaho, essentially 20 years ago, was a group that they did this film on, and there's several men just in that group. A few of them are vets that said that, yeah, this group is what saved their life
Hmm.
because you've seen these vets, the trauma that they've endured and the impact of that trauma is huge, and um, they need a safe place to unpack that.
Yeah. Hmm. So with all the training you've gone through, that you've created, that you put out into the world, um, does anything stand top of mind that if you wish, more men knew this one thing, is there a one thing?
Probably that, if they want to change their life in their relationships, which is often what they want to change, and in their own experience of their own life, the short course is to use your body as a tool to get there. And that's what I've been honing for coming on 50 years, but in the last 30 years, particularly with men. And um, and the research is catching up to what we're doing. It's just getting proving what we did. And they did a big study on this course I told you about, and it was published in the premier psychological journal, the APA journal, about this course, an 18-page paper about the value of this work and what it did for these men. And so, yeah, I think if guys can use their bodies as a vehicle to change their lives, uh, they'll see a huge benefit from it.
And you don't mean, get up and take action in that traditional sense, but using the inner wisdom or the inner healer, their body in a new way.
Yeah, using their awareness of their body, what's happening in their body, learning some, you might say science, some principles that I could teach in a few minutes, but really learning how to apply it. That's the thing. and practicing in a safe place to apply these simple skills and then applying them in life because they work, you're going to see reinforcements in your life. It's going to compound. And because we're hardwired to use these skills, once you learn them, they pretty much stay there. It's not like you got to remember them. It's just like we got two arms, and I've just gotten really good at using my right arm, and my left arm is sort of atrophied. But if I start to strengthen it, I start to use it for other different things. It gets stronger. It's as agile, and so I get this ability to be ambidextrous. And so that's sort of what we're talking about with the body. Is we got this huge resource that we think in most ways, or in this culture, it's just a vehicle to get us from place A to place B, to eat food, to have sex, and maybe do sports with. And for most guys, short of that, that's it. But it has a lot more capacity to serve us than just those few things.
Great. So you mentioned that relationships are often the driving force for a man to seek help, to seek growth. Do you have any advice for women that see their men struggling?
More, more and more women send men to us because they see this, and women care about their man, be it their partner or their son or whoever. But in a general sense, a couple of things. That first, and this is sort of what like Porges tells therapists to tell their clients, and I would adapt it for women telling men, is that men really want to succeed, but they don't because of a couple reasons. One is the culture that we've grown up in, and women have grown up in this culture too, so they're limited for sure. But men, and I think most women would agree that men are more limited than women are in general, and like the biggest one is men can't show their emotions. So we got all these cultural beliefs. A lot of them are subjective or inferential, or, they're not necessarily plastered on billboards, but we know them when we believe them. We often, as kids, are teaching them to our friends, like, "Oh, you're a crybaby because you're crying because you hurt your knee." So we reinforce or enforce these beliefs. So the culture is, in some ways, our enemy as men. So when women understand that, that gives them and men a little more space. And then the other part is the trauma that men have suffered. Again, it's not taking away women from the trauma they've suffered, but traditionally, as men, we've seen, we get our approval by how well we perform. And a lot of that performance has been on the physical realm. From now we went from the farm to the Industrial Revolution, where it was less physical, but still in the beginning very physical, to the tech revolution, where in general work isn't physical, but still that belief that we need to be strong, we need to be big, we need to do all these physical things is imbued in us, and that can be a limitation for certain men. And we're the ones that generally go off and fight the wars, and with that come back traumatized. So there's all these things that men are dealing with. And there's a fellow named Richard Reeves that wrote the book of Boys to Men. We had him on our program too. He's a Brit. He was working for the Brookings Institute. Now he has his own based on his book. And he just unpacks the whole dynamics that boys and men are suffering. And he distills it down to say, look, the liberals have it wrong and the conservatives have it wrong. The conservatives want to take us all back to the 50s, where whatever the man wants is what we all have to do. He knows best. And then the liberals see it as anything you do for men or boys, you're taking it away from the women and girls. And Reeves says, and I would agree, both are wrong. And it serves women to understand and really support the development of boys and men. But it's not the development in the way that we traditionally have seen how to develop men emotionally. And what I would say specifically around that is that, particularly since we left, the farm for the Industrial Revolution, women had to show up because men, had to go to work. So it's like the women became the sole parent, the teachers were women, and then the nurses and therapists are women. So what's happened over a few hundred years, what it is to be emotional as a man has sort of skewed towards the feminine. And it's not a conspiracy theory, it's just how it's happened. And so some of psychology or therapy and the culture, it's trying to have us be emotional like women. And I say to women, I say to men, women are really good at knowing when we get it right. They're not nearly as good at telling us how to get to right. But you put me, you, or any guy in a good group or good training, the experience of being with other men is going to hone that guy's emotional skills. One, because he's going to see it, and maybe there's a little teaching, but mainly because he has, a safe place to practice it. And so what I've seen over the decades of working with men is when guys get it, a lot of it's just the practice, women love it. And they don't understand necessarily what we're doing entirely or how the guy's getting it, but they love the result. And the joke in my ongoing group or groups has been the best night for romance or sex has been the night of the group. Because these guys come home, and I've had women, because I used to live in this small town, these women come up to me and thank me for, the group and what the guys were, their husbands were getting from the group. And a few of these women literally said things like, he's so attractive. I want to rip his clothes off because he's present, he's masculine, he's vulnerable, he's open, he's engaging, and the women just melt. Now, they don't know what we do in our groups, but they like what is produced out of that.
Right. They like the results. Yeah. Cool. So, Owen, what's the best way for people to learn more about MELD?
Go to our website, meld.community. It's MELD, and then community is spelled out. We have newsletters, which, men and women can join. We have a free membership, which is just for men. And they can learn about the programs we have, the thought leaders we bring on. We're here to really support men in creating a new model of what it is to be a man.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a model that, always needs updating and expansion. And it really is something that I think is really alive and ever changing.
Yeah. And this as well as I do, that men are really wanting it, and more than ever are seeking it out. I think we've always needed it, but each year men are more open, maybe more courageous, maybe bigger necessities, but whatever. They're coming to all our programs because they want this.
Awesome. Well, Owen, it was great to connect with you again and learn all about MELD. And I love how you are bringing so much science and research into personal growth and to leadership. So kudos to you, and I hope great success with MELD and all of your upcoming events and retreats and everything else that you create. Thanks for tuning in and listening to us today. Please visit realmenfeel.org. There'll be a blog post for this episode, and there'll be links for all the books and the programs mentioned, ways to catch up with MELD, and way to dig deeper into all the books that Owen mentioned. Wherever you're discovering Real Men Feel, please subscribe, follow, like, share this with somebody, post a review or a comment. You can always reach out to me at realmenfeel@gmail.com. I'm always glad to hear from you. And until next time, be good to yourself.